In the 80s and early 90s, America was obsessed with over-the-top dystopian action movies. The development team at Williams Electronics decided to bottle that feeling, mashing a classic arcade formula with a heavy dose of media satire. The result was a futuristic game show, a blood-soaked fever dream that promised big money, big prizes, or a very, very quick death. That game was Smash TV. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Arcade Economy, the series where we take a look at old arcade classics to determine just how much they would have cost to beat at the time of their release. In our last episode, we explored one of the greatest sci-fi crossovers of all time with Alien vs. Predator. Today, we're putting our lives on the line as a contestant on 1990's Smash TV. Was Smash TV the ultimate adrenaline rush, a fair and balanced challenge for skilled players? Or was it designed to throw impossible odds at you until your wallet was empty? Let's get ready for the show. I love it!
Good luck! You'll need it!
In the early 90s, programmer Mark Turmel was just getting his start with arcade developer Williams Electronics. Turmel teamed up with legendary game designer Eugene Jarvis to produce a new, fast-paced, over-the-top action game. Jarvis already had a number of hits under his belt, with 1981's Defender and its sequel Stargate, but most importantly to this video, Robotron 2084. Robotron was a top-down twin-stick shooter in which the player would use one stick for movement and the other stick for shooting. Jarvis and Turmel used Robotron as a precursor for what would become Smash TV nearly a decade later.
Really, in Robotron, it was the easy thing to do with the technology at the time, and it turned out kind of interesting. In Smash TV, we actually chose that, the dynamic there, because the cool thing of that dynamic is it's a confinement. It's a sense of being trapped and surrounded with no escape.
Turmel hired comic book artist John Tobias to create the characters and environments for the game. Sound designer John Hay would script and compose the game, with sound designer Paul Heitch voicing the game's announcer.
Big money! Big prizes! I love it!
The development team took heavy influences from 80s dystopian sci-fi flicks like The Running Man and RoboCop. Smash TV released in 1990 and was received very well, becoming a hit for Williams. It even won the Amusement and Music Operators Association Award for Most Innovative Game. As with most hits at the time, the game would be ported to home computers and the NES. On the Sega Genesis and Super NES, it was released under the name Super Smash TV, which I must admit I thought was a sequel upon seeing it, but nope, it's just a really good port of the original. When playing on the NES, players could use both D-pads on two controllers to move and aim, something that was pretty innovative at the time. The SNES version made use of its 4 buttons to act as a secondary D-pad for firing. While Smash TV never got any official sequels, many of the same developers would go on to work on a spiritual successor, Total Carnage, which released in 1992. Like Smash TV, Total Carnage was a dual-stick shooter, but unlike Smash TV, Total Carnage featured large scrolling levels. Unfortunately, Total Carnage did not have the same success in the arcades as Smash TV, and that might be why we haven't seen any sequels to either of these games. In the year 2000, Midway would release The Grid, another game seen to be a late spiritual successor to Smash TV. The game was a fast-paced third-person shooter developed by the Mortal Kombat team, and featured a joystick and trackball combo for movement and shooting. It had the same violent dystopian game show aesthetic as Smash TV, complete with an energetic announcer.
It's time to play the grid, where contestants find out
As mentioned previously, the game pulls its story mostly from dystopian future films, especially The Running Man. Set in the distant future of 1999, players compete in what the game flat out calls the most violent game show of all time. The show, known as, you guessed it, Smash TV, is the most popular show on television. Your goal is to survive a gauntlet of arenas while collecting wads of cash, gold, silver, and an assortment of typical game show prizes, from VCRs to toasters. Running this whole bloodbath is the show's unhinged host, constantly screaming things like,
Carnage! I love it!
a line that would later become the title of the 1992 Successor. And in a perfect nod to 80s dystopia, the game's other iconic catchphrase,
I'd buy that for $1.
was lifted directly from a fictional TV show in RoboCop.
I'd buy that for $1.
The real prize of the game was the legendary Pleasure Dome, an area of the game that would be dangled in front of players throughout your playthrough. Initially, the developers didn't even bother to include this in the game. They just assumed that the game was unbeatable and that players wouldn't be good enough or wealthy enough to make it to the end. It wasn't until Williams' leadership stepped in and later forced the dev team to include a Pleasure Dome area at the end of the game, which had to be shipped out to arcade owners as a revision. In the new revision, players can collect a number of keys as prizes. If you're able to collect 10 or more keys, you'll be granted entry into the Pleasure Dome, a bonus area filled with bikini-clad blonde babes that can be collected for extra points, before making your way to the final boss. Now, in my previous video, I called Smash TV a run and gun, which isn't exactly correct. Sure, you are running and gunning, but when looking at traditional run and guns like Contra, Aliens, or Metal Slug, it's fairly different. Smash TV is a twin-stick shooter, a genre that was uncommon in the arcades, which is surprising because I feel like these controls are very fluid and intuitive. The game can be played with up to 2 players, who will enter a single-screen arena to take on waves upon waves of enemies until all enemies are killed. Players must watch where they step because landmines are scattered throughout each level and become more frequent as you progress. During combat, power-ups and weapons will pop up on the screen for temporary advantages. Money, precious metals, and gift-wrapped prizes will also appear and can be collected to increase your player score. The gun upgrades include a spread gun, grenade launcher, and rocket launcher. Power-ups found in the game are a speed boost, extra life, a barrier of razors, a drone that follows you and doubles your projectiles, an invincibility shield, and a bomb that nukes all enemies on screen.
Bingo!
Each level is made up of several rooms, and upon beating the first room in a level, a map will appear, making the player aware of which routes they can take to get to the level's boss. If players choose, they can take a direct route to the boss, or opt to go for extra bonus rooms to pad their stats and gain more points. New enemy varieties will be added with each level and become more difficult as you progress. Smash TV might have the most intuitive gameplay mechanics out of any game in the arcade, in my opinion, which is why it's so shocking to me that twin-stick shooters never really took off. Smash TV is notorious for its high difficulty, and that really comes in when you see just the waves and waves of enemies that the game throws at you. There are a total of 4 bosses in the game, and each boss fight appears to go on for way longer than it should. The first boss is Mutoid Man. He's invulnerable to your normal gunfire, so you'll need power-ups in order to damage him. I suggest taking out the 2 gunners on the front of his mech first. He'll also be able to shoot lasers out of his eyes and will flatten you with his wheels if you try to go behind or in front of him. The second boss is Scarface. Like Mutoid Man, he is also invulnerable to your normal gunfire. He'll vomit up a bunch of projectiles and ricocheting blades at you, so please don't stop moving. You'll have to take out all of the panels on his sides before you can defeat him. He also will flatten you if he runs you over. It's best to just try and keep your distance, and like I said, keep moving. The third boss is Cobros, or is it D-Cobros? I'm not sure. 2 robotic cobras that shoot fire beams at you. This is the only boss that your regular gun can damage. Watch out for the ricocheting blades again, and try to aim for the cobra's heads. The final boss is the game's announcer himself, Evil MC, which I believe is just a reskin of Mutoid Man. Use the same strategy here as you did with Mutoid Man. I do think he might be a little bit faster than the first boss, though. And now it's time to answer the question that we've all been waiting for: how much did I spend to beat Smash TV? Now, I play these games on their default settings, so for Smash TV, that meant 25-cent plays, and each play gave me 3 lives. At the end of the game, I spent $15.50 or 62 plays. Now, back in 1990, $15.50 would feel like spending $39.06 today. It took me 1 hour and 8 minutes to beat Smash TV, making this the longest game that I've played that you can just quarter feed your way through. So that's not looking at games that have like limited continues or require a certain skill in order to progress. That factors out to about 23 cents per minute, so really almost a quarter per minute you're entering when beating Smash TV. For the bosses, I spent 75 cents on Mutoid Man, $1 on Scarface, $1 on Die Cobras, and 75 cents on Evil MC, bringing my boss total to $3.50. And now it's time to bust out the Predatory game scale to determine just how predatory Smash TV was in stealing your money. Now, like I said, Smash TV is a game that is notorious for its difficulty. Overall spend was high, especially when looking at other games around this time. And the rate of spend being 25 cents per minute is a little outrageous. Does this game cheat or is it unfair? I don't know if it necessarily cheats, but it certainly is unfair. I don't think it's even remotely possible to come close to 1cc'ing this game, although Mark Turmel in an interview did say that he can.
I could do Smash TV from start to finish on 1 quarter.
Sure, Jan.
I'm not calling him a liar, although that's exactly what I'm doing. I mean, this game just overwhelms you with so many enemies that you're constantly feeding quarters into the machine and taking damage and dying. And when you think about it, if you have to put a quarter in every minute and the game gives you 3 lives per play, that means you're going through 3 lives in almost every minute. The boss fights also just go on for way too long. When looking at punitive game mechanics, outside of the overwhelming amount of enemies and boss fights that go on for too long, the game does everything else exceptionally well. The game controls feel really fluid and responsive. There isn't really any type of learning curve. There are tons of power-ups and weapon pickups to keep the gameplay fresh, and the continue system allows you to keep going and keep your progress as long as you have the bankroll. The game is really fun, and it's also really addictive. I do think some of the levels do go on a little bit too long, especially later in the game. It felt to me like I was in one room for like 10 minutes at some time. I'm sure it's not actually that long, but there were plenty of times where I was playing the game and thinking to myself, when is this room over? As I'm just mowing down enemies and the time is just kind of ticking. But overall, I had a blast, even though it was an expensive game. Now, before I reveal my score, there are a few things that heavily weighed into this. Mainly the development team wasn't even trying to hide the fact that they were just trying to squeeze everything out of the arcade player for this game. I mean, hell, they didn't even bother adding the Pleasure Dome into the game because they didn't think anyone would make it that far. Eugene Jarvis also has done interviews where he's gone on record talking about how Smash TV was designed to take a quarter every minute from players.
There's always that chemistry between, how far can you screw the player, and how much can you give the player, and how much can you screw him in.
Right.
And you're trying to get money out of the player.
So to me, this game has to be high on the score. I had a hard time placing Smash TV because, for one, it is fun. And it is really easy to understand. But also the game is just really trying to take your money, and it is very addictive. So really, I'm between a 9 and a 10 with this one. So far, the few games that I have given out 10s for, I've done so because they've had a lot of either input reading or just levels that you really cannot surpass, or very heavily steep learning curves with very high difficulty, or just flat out poor game mechanics. Smash TV feels different than that. I think Smash TV is hard. I think Smash TV is cheap. I think Smash TV is predatory and addictive. But is it a 10? I've given this a lot of thought, and my final score for Smash TV is a 9 out of 10 on the Predatory game scale.
Bingo!
Next time on Arcade Economy, I'm playing through Sega's 1988 beat-em-up Altered Beast. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to support Mass Replay, you can do so by becoming a member on YouTube or a patron on Patreon. Supporting the channel at the VIP viewer level will give you access to all of my videos early and ad-free, plus you'll be able to play with me during our monthly community streams. You can also support us at the producer level and get your name shouted out in my videos, just like our Patreon producers, Paula Boone, I Am Weed, Tanner, and Pezmage. So a big thank you to our Patreon producers. Some of them do have their own YouTube channels, which I recommend you check out, and we'll link to them in my description. But just you being here supports me a ton, so thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a big thumbs up, and hopefully you'll see me on my next video. Thank you for watching.